Hey guys, welcome back to World of Warships. Today we're taking a look at the Bart B. This ship is kind of incredible. In fact, I might have been wrong about the Bart. Yeah, we might be back here again. Bart played incredibly well for me while recording for this video. I was very surprised. Bart is a ship that I in the past have not enjoyed all that much. I found it to be rather inconsistent and much worse than just a tier 9 version of the Bourgogne. It's much slower, less maneuverable, and the lack of shell volume certainly does hurt it at times. Yet for some reason, while playing it, it just decided to hit very consistently into broadside targets. And it was a ton of fun to play. In fact, I found it to be more comfortable to play than a Bourgogne. Although, you know, I'm getting fortunate to not see carriers in a lot of the games that I did play, as well as not dealing with too much 32mm overmatch or very strong long-range farming cruisers. Look at that dispersion into the DD, though, by the way. That reload booster getting us a ton of damage into that destroyer. Very effective damage, too. Much better than, say, HE farming battleships with this ship. Although it does that rather well, too. I have a game to show you, or clips of a game to show you at the end, that this ship can farm extremely well. But let's talk about the price. This ship is not cheap. Canadian, it's $87 and only available for real money purchase. Unfortunately, this is one of those 4 that Wargaming decided to not make available for doubloons. Really hope they change that for next year. Doesn't seem like they're going to change it for this year, unfortunately, but would love to see it back for doubloons. It's a very strong ship. In the tier list, I put it top of B tier. And honestly, it deserves to go quite a bit higher than that. I still wouldn't put it S tier for me personally. S tier was the ships I would buy if I were to restart my account entirely. And I still don't think I would necessarily buy the Bart outright. But it certainly is an A tier ship for me. Very strong. I'd rather play this than Alaska at this point. I had a much better time with Bart than I did with the Alaska. I might have got lucky with the matchmaker, certainly. That is a large portion of tier 9 ships these days. Playing tier 9 into super ships is very difficult, especially one that has a lot of 32mm armor. There's some very strong farming cruisers. There's some very powerful battleships with 32mm overmatch at the super ships tier. And we didn't really see those at all, which helps a ton. And I found this ship to be more comfortable than Bourgogne. It's crazy, but I did. Bourgogne has to go somewhat broadside, I guess, to use all of its guns. Where Bart, you can park it on an island when there's no farming cruisers able to farm you over these islands, and there's no carrier. No carrier specifically. You can set up on these islands, point your bow to the enemy, and just shoot. It's actually very relaxing. It's a very nice, chill playstyle. The guns have incredible shell velocity, meaning you can hit targets relatively easy at range. I've been playing Alabama and Massachusetts over the last couple of days, and this shell velocity was a serious breath of fresh air. It was very nice to have. And dispersion was cooperating, man. I usually found it to be a bit of a shotgun. Sure, you get the reload booster to make up for that a little bit, but I found it to be rather inconsistent in the past, and I found that annoying. And yet, I was getting some great salvos. I still got trolled from time to time, but it was working very well for me. That's the reason that I didn't put it particularly highly in the past, and I underestimated the value that this ship brings relative to Bourgogne. This is a bit of a player who's played the game a long time, played clan battles a lot, right? I've played at a reasonably high level before, and I have a lot of steel saved up. Bourgogne is not a very expensive ship for someone like me to get, but for an average player, you're not getting very much steel. You're getting hardly any steel. And Bart brings most of that Bourgogne playstyle, in fact, at a better tier. If you get tier 9 matchmaker, it's much more fun to play this ship at mid-tier or high tier like this, not facing the top tier, I guess I should say. Much more fun to play this thing at this tier than Bourgogne into super ships tier, for example. You're going to see more of that, more 32mm overmatch, more stronger farming cruisers at tier 10, more passive playstyle at tier 10. And tier 9 gets that a lot too, but there's games like this where we can just fight some tier 7s and have an absolute blast with this thing. Shooting Palmer and Superstructure, of course, trying to get some big damage in there. And we've already used up 2 of our reload boosters. That's something I struggle with at times when playing these French ships with reload boosters. I'm a little bit too greedy. So I wait for the perfect opportunity to use it. And then there's games where I just never end up using them all. And I'm just leaving damage on the table. So certainly with your first 2 boosters, I would be using them very quickly, even if you don't think it's going to be the most impactful salvo. But if someone's showing you broadside at reasonable range, just send it. Honestly, you want to be using these boosters. And this is a surprisingly tanky ship as well, assuming, I'm going to say this every time because 32 mil armor is so bad these days. No 32 mil overmatch and no 32 mil HE farming cruisers that get a hold of you. It's relatively tanky. I had some games where I had upwards of 3, even I think I had a 4 million potential damage game. It's maneuverable enough. Not quite as good as Bourgogne, as I've already said, but it's maneuverable enough, especially with this engine boost and propulsion mod, to play this bow in on an island roll and then just shuffle forwards and backwards. It throws off enemies' aim rather well. At slow speeds like this, I think the aim assist kind of gets thrown off sometimes too, and that can help you out as well. You know, we did get trolled from time to time with the salvos. It's not going to be the perfectly accurate battleship. It's by no means battle cruiser dispersion or cruiser dispersion like we've seen on Tennessee. It is just standard battleship dispersion. In fact, it has some of the worst horizontal dispersion at tier 9 as far as battleships. Not by much, just a tiny bit. The vertical is just a tiny bit better, though, to compensate, I guess. And then 1.9 Sigma, which is fine. As we saw with Alabama, though, 1.9 Sigma does not mean it's particularly accurate. It certainly helps to have the dispersion module upgrade, where the Alabama, those American tier 8s, don't even get that option. So definitely taking that here, and of course going with a reload mod. I think I took heavy AP as well, just to boost the AP damage. This ship can farm and does farm well with the HE, and you probably should be swapping to the HE more than I did in most of these games. I'm a little bit more greedy, I guess, is the right word to put it. I love the black ribbons, man. I just love them. That's my favorite part of playing these battleships. Positioning myself well, catching people off guard, and then getting rewarded for it. I love it. And John Bart came through for me. But there's going to be a lot of games where things are passive, we know these days, and having the HE power that John Bart does have is a very nice option for those situations where you're in those up tiers, you're in those 20-kilometer, everybody's kiting, angled, sniping games. Just swap to the HE and you're still going to do great, where the AP with 380mm guns, you don't have very much overmatch. The alpha damage is a little lower, so some of those superstructure pens or overpens aren't going to do quite as much damage. Just send it with the HE. As someone who fights these things from time to time, it's annoying when you fight and you just sling the HE at me. I'm playing well, I'm angled, I'm doing good things, and then the Jean Bart just swaps to the HE and I just get smacked anyway. It's annoying to fight, but that's a good strategy too. If you find something annoying when you're fighting an enemy ship, if you ever find yourself in that ship or class, do that thing you found annoying. It's probably pretty good if you found it annoying. Sure, Suyu here taking a big hit. Yeah, DD damage, guys. It's super valuable. Dealing this much damage into them, using our reload boosters. I was a little too aggressive with that last reload booster, kind of wasted it. But I really want to do that damage to destroyers. That way I can push up without having to worry about the torpedoes as much. This is a ship without a hydro, of course, so you're gonna have to watch out. Also, 69,000 HP is nice, but it's not great for tier 9 these days. Certainly not with this armor. It's a little bit squishy. So you're more of a mid-range ship. Don't think you're gonna just full send charge into enemy ships. If you run into the new Pan American battleships, of course, stay out of secondary range. You already knew that, I'm sure, but doesn't hurt to mention it again. Weimar taking a citadel at 20 kilometers just like that. Yeah, this game's about to get very spicy. It's been a good game so far, but the guns just decided at the end of this game to smash everything. The dispersion was excellent. We can poke around these islands, and this is why it's a little more comfortable than a Bourgogne. With a Bourgogne, I would feel bad about only poking with my front guns around islands, and I would feel a little bit bad about turning my turrets to a target on the other side of my ship or the bow of my ship. and not using my rear turret. I'm greedy to get all of those turrets online. Whereas with Jean Bart, you just kind of point generally towards the enemy ships and just move your turrets to wherever the enemy ship is showing broadside. It's great. I would highly recommend this ship to people who know that you're not getting a lot of steel. If you want that Bourgogne fun playstyle, and you know you're never going to get Bourgogne, or it's unlikely you're going to get Bourgogne, the steel to get it, look at the reload, man, allowing us to get that sneaky shot into the Amagi, getting us a Citadel. Look at the damage, man, in the last minute or so. I gotta recommend it, man. It sucks that it's not for doubloons, but I gotta recommend it. I've seen the light, I suppose. It's been years, actually, since I got the original Jean Bart. I got it back in the beginning, and I never really enjoyed it all that much. And years later, I found out that it's very, very good, man. In this game specifically, this is my best game I've ever had in Jean Bart. And this is the first one I played when I sat down to record for this video. It just decided to work today, man. I don't know. I gotta mention, though, that it doesn't always perform this well. History for me, and this is obviously subjective, but that's the way these videos always are. You already know that by now. It's all subjective. But in the past, historically, this ship has not performed particularly well for me. So I do have to mention that. It may not for you either, but for those of you who over the years who have said it's your favorite ship and told me to keep trying it again, you're right. You were right. Broadside Marlboro. That's a pretty long range shot. And another Citadel. It just decided to work, man. I don't know. I'm so happy with it, though. 260,000 damage. We're near enough on a Kraken. We got the Confed. We got the High Cal. And this is an AP game, too. We're not swapping to the HE. There would be times where swapping to the HE would have net me more damage, certainly into some of those close-range destroyers. I still want to shoot AP into DDs at longer ranges or when they're angled, because when the HE hits the superstructure of destroyers, there's so many modules, right? So many little guns, torpedo tubes. You hit those, and you're doing no damage to the hull. You're doing damage to that module. And so the armor piercing will overpen through that and still give you damage to the hull. That's the reason why at longer ranges and when ships are angled, destroyers specifically are angled at medium to long range, I'm still going to swap or at least stay on the armor piercing. But if they're broadside at close range and you can guarantee, or at least mostly guarantee, those hits into the hull of the destroyer, yeah, the HE just slaps. It is very, very good. But there's a little bit of nuance there, even on a ship like the Jean Bart, which has very strong HE and a little bit weaker AP alpha. And of course, yes, it is being consistent today, so we're just going to do that much damage to the Constellation. Kraken 277 feels good, man. Not by no means the most insane Jean Bart games. There are some absolute ridiculous replays of this ship out there. But for me, this is surprisingly is the best I've ever done in this thing. To be fair, I probably haven't played it that much, considering how much I didn't enjoy it in the past. And near enough, 2.2 million credits. Yes, Tier 9 premiums are the way to go for credits. Obviously, you want ships that are going to have a lot of battle impact as well. You want ships that you're going to perform in yourself. That's the key as well. It's not just get the most broken high tier premium. You do need to still perform well in-game. And a lot of that comes down to battle impact, shooting DDs, contesting caps, not just HE farming battleships. That is the least impactful form of damage that I can think of in this game. So shooting at DDs is a good idea. Unfortunately, we missed the Benson there. I aimed a little bit high, dispersion a little trolly. That's fine. And we take 12,500 damage from a Musashi at 22 kilometers. I gotta include it, okay? I'm gonna sing Jean Bart's praises, but I still have to let you guys know that it gets overmatched, and it hurts, man. But at closer ranges, you can deal with it a little bit more. I think that Massachusetts was turning out. That's why that one went low. I did not quite lead for that, rushed my shot a little bit. Here's another example of using the reload booster maybe too aggressively, but again, like I said, I'm trying to use it aggressively. Guarantee that shot in on the cruiser. I wasn't sure if he would stay spotted going behind that little island there. Apparently he stayed spotted, but not always. You never know how these islands work sometimes. But it does mean we waste the rest of the reload booster, I suppose. But now that we're loaded again and around the island, maybe it wasn't as much of a waste as I thought. Maybe a couple seconds there only. We do get another shot into the Okendo, and that thing's got a large Citadel, so nice to see some consistent Citadel hits into him, I gotta say. And now we're gonna push. This ship does very well on a flank like this. It hurts so much when there's a carrier, though. You need to have the ability to go dark. The concealment is great. You need this ability to sneak up through islands and poke your nose around and limit angles. It's a lot like, well, that's a nice dev strike to get. 2 hits, 2 Citadels. Special Commander giving us a nice reload buff for that dev strike too. We'll take that. But you need to isolate 1v1s, right? I always talk about that whenever I'm dealing with broadside or brawling battleships, right? Jean Bart's similar, except I would do it more mid-range. I wouldn't get quite as close, but here's the overmatch again. Yeah, it just hurts. You want to isolate the angles is the idea with the Jean Bart. So here, trying to only focus on Massachusetts, not allowing the Musashi to get shots in on us is very important here. Just straight up overlead the Massachusetts. Didn't expect him or didn't read that he was slowing down quite that quickly. And our gun got taken out. Yes, we've all seen the meme pictures. It is a factor on Jean Bart. You can permanently destroy Jean Bart guns. It's happened to me before, but where both guns have been permanently destroyed. It's rare, certainly rare that happens, but it can. And that is a serious pain point on this ship. The guns just don't have a lot of HP or armor on them, I guess. Combination of both, perhaps. And at high tier like this, there's some pretty large caliber AP that punches through and knocks them out very, very quickly. So it's not going to happen often, but it happens more often to Jean Bart than almost any other battleship, I would say. So something to keep in mind, I suppose. Holland looks to be rushing us here, and thanks to our reload booster, I'm not too worried, but we're still going to try and avoid those torpedoes. So if he's coming around this side, we're going to push forward and not give him a torpedo angle. We also have an Azuma with us as well, but to guarantee this so we don't eat all of those torpedoes, I am going to use a reload booster here. I'm just preparing it. And it's one of the reasons you want to sometimes save your reload booster, even if there's a good opportunity. Saving your booster for this crucial engagement at close range where someone's YOLOing you is very, very valuable. You don't want to put all your eggs in one basket, I suppose, where with Alabama yesterday, we were talking about it. It doesn't have the secondaries of Massachusetts, so brawling is harder if you don't trust those main guns, which I didn't. And with Jean Bart, I don't always trust these main guns, certainly in the past, much less. This today went very well while I was recording this. And at least you have that reload booster to guarantee another salvo into someone at least. And that helps a lot for these more close range situations. It helps a lot for when people go broadside, and you sometimes will get 2 salvos into them, not just 1. Some ships are maneuverable enough to only get 1 salvo still, even with this reload booster. But it's very nice to have that extra level of consistency. Now, dealing with a Musashi in a brawl, do not go directly bow in. You kind of have to bait them to shoot your belt armor. But this guy knows. This Musashi player knew to shoot the bow. There's actually a corner where you can almost cheek a French battleship, much like you would into a Yamato, except it's a much smaller corner to hit. It's a bit like GK, cheeking a GK. And that guy knew where to aim, so that would have been a problem if this brawl had lasted a little bit longer. But you notice that the armor is pretty good as a belt. The belt armor is very good. It's got a lot of trolley, spaced armor, but everything else is 32, so then he just overmatches into us. So bow on just guarantees those overmatch pens. Broadside Satsuma, first salvo, 2 Citadels. A little disappointed in the dispersion there, but here's that consistency, right? We're allowed to take an extra salvo or 2 much faster. Next one, much better. 3 Citadels this time. Satsuma, of course, has one of the largest Citadels in the game, so I still would have preferred a few more hits into him, but... and look, that Guden's guns were not even pointing at me, and yet they still shot me. There's some desync at times, guys. Not just aim bugs. There's some other oddities going on in this video game. But also, Guden bombs, terrifying when you're playing a Jean Bart. Anything with 32 mil armor, of course. And what is this on this flank, guys? What is this? This is one Musashi. This is two Musashis and a Yamato. Terrifying. So this is a flank where you're going to struggle. Up tiered like this, especially against 32 mil overmatch. At least when an HE spamming cruiser is farming you, maybe even they pen 32, the fire damage is 100% healable. AP pen damage is not as much, so it's kind of painful. That's why I'm going to play very, very passive, very, very far back here. Try and use our throttle to juke incoming fire. We have to avoid as much as we can. We can't just tank through the shells. And spamming some HE. We're going to get some good salvos. We get a reasonable number of fires too, but playing far, far back here. Nice big salvo there and a double fire. And that Yamato had used his damage control. So that's just a guaranteed fire burning. I'm skipping through a lot of this because it was pretty boring kiting HE spam gameplay. Less interesting, I think, but I want to show that it is possible. We have up over close to 3 million potential damage despite this matchmaker. That's pretty good and decent amounts of damage. It's basically all been HE though, so not as impactful, certainly. Farming battleships with HE is, sure, we get big number, but it doesn't mean you're going to help your team win all that much, I would say. Using our reload booster to try and guarantee hits in on a Musashi after they use damage control. That's another excellent use for this damage control. Guaranteeing hits into broadside ships, guaranteeing hits into vulnerable destroyers, and guaranteeing hits after you see an enemy use their damage control with the HE. We'll take a blind fire and we get 4 hits. That's some RNG. I'll take it though. 4 hits blind fire like that on a DD is not guaranteed with lock-on. Without lock-on, I should say. It's a good ship, man. It's performed quite well for me throughout my time playing it here for this 2024 Black Friday. And I think it's a good, fun, interesting ship to get. I think it's much more vulnerable to matchmaker than it used to be. I don't think it's nearly the level that it was years ago when Wargaming decided to remove it from sale. I think the matchmaker has caught up. I think the new Pan American battleships are terrifying to fight with this thing. But it's still a very strong ship and is a very unique playstyle, especially for those of you that don't have a lot of steel. You don't have a lot of steel, this is a great way to get the same playstyle as a Bourgogne. And as funny as it is for me to keep doing these, I was wrong about X ship, and honestly, they'll probably continue in the future. My goal is actually not to bait you guys in. This isn't like clickbait. My goal is to just give you my honest thoughts on ships. And if I'm not enjoying a ship at a certain time, I'm going to tell you guys. And that's why you got to look at multiple perspectives and realize that people are biased towards different playstyles. And for me, when Jean Bart in the past was performing a bit like a shotgun without any armor, and Bourgogne was much more consistent for me, I think it makes sense why I wasn't as big a fan of this ship. But I guess I had to play it more, or the guns just started working. Somebody flipped a switch in the background on my Jean Bart, I guess. But as always, definitely look for multiple perspectives. Don't just get your information from one source, and then you're going to get a clearer picture of a lot of these ships. But I'm very glad that I was able to change my mind, or the game showed me that Jean Bart can perform incredibly well and is a very fun ship to play, because Bourgogne is a ton of fun and it's not really accessible to a lot of people, especially if you're just getting into the game. And Jean Bart gives you most of that playstyle. It is quite a bit slower though. It is not just Bourgogne minus a turret at a tier lower. It is much slower. And that does come in to be a pretty big factor for the Bourgogne, allowing it to flank much better. But Jean Bart still gets most of the way there, I would say, and is a pretty fun pickup. Unfortunate that Wargaming has it only available for real money purchase this time. Really disappointed in that. I've said it a lot, but I'm going to keep saying it because I'm disappointed. You're disappointed in it. I think Wargaming messed up there, and they should do better next year, I hope. 22.9 second reload here with this build. Full reload, of course, going for that. Pretty standard battleship build here. Taking propulsion mod just to try and avoid shells rather than tank through them. 32 millimeters of armor is pretty bad. So we want to avoid as much as we can. And if you're wondering about that kind of cheek citadel idea, it's kind of through here, depending on the angle you give. And you can kind of bypass the turtle back here. It's very small. And then if you're a little bit more angled forward, then you can start to hit the bow part of the citadel. Even if you don't overmatch 32, at an angle like this won't be angled enough to auto bounce. So even if you have 406s, you can still do this salvo into here. But if you go directly bow on to anything that doesn't overmatch 32, it's going to be pretty tanky. I mean, you still have a big superstructure to hit. Your guns can eat some damage or even get knocked out perma. But you're going to do okay. As soon as they overmatch 32, though, you're just guaranteeing massive salvos in here. My goal is to try and bait people into shooting the broadside belt armor, which is rather thick and has some spaced armor characteristics too, which means sometimes the shells will pen, but just do no damage because they don't get through the whole thing. And kiting is a little bit harder since you don't have any guns back here. So turret management is quite important on this thing. The AA is okay, but is any AA really good enough to play on an island these days in a carrier game? No. So don't do the playstyle I was showing you, certainly not in that first game, if there's a carrier in the match. It's much, much more difficult to deal with in those games. The spotting, the extra damage you're going to be taking, and of course, the carrier just flying over and dropping you. Secondaries are not worth taking on this. I know you probably want to. Look at all the secondaries in the back here, but it's just not worth taking, guys. You have to take IFHE to get these to even pen anything. And doing that kills the fire chance. They do not have good accuracy at all either. It's much better to just go for the main guns on this thing. And that's what I've been going for here. I'm even taking things like super heavy AP just to get that damage up just a little bit higher. Close to 13,000 alpha damage. Feels pretty good. And that does mean you're taking more fire damage though. So you got to be a little bit careful there. It's a little bit less tanky. If you're not as confident or you find you're dying quicker, then you don't need super heavy AP. It's still going to do excellent, excellent damage with these guns, with that reload booster. At least that's what I found while playing it this time. I'm happy. I'm very happy. I had a great time, man. I was laughing. I was really enjoying myself playing this ship. And I'm very glad that I got that experience with the Jean Bart. So let me know what you think in the comments down below. Thank you very much for watching and have a great rest of your day.